What I'm going to do is do a recap of some of the key points from the last time. We did a half-hour video before about really the importance of feeling safe and how the feeling safe allows learning to happen, and how the Surefoot process really helps horses and other animals to feel safe. And so it's a foundation for opening up the doors to learning. And I just wanted to recap a couple of slides from that, and then open it up for Wendy to talk about your experience with horses. Play from start. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
The slides came up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is just a recap as we mime and do all these other things. Nothing like sort of creating all is well in the middle of chaos, right? This is good. So at the last talk, I was talking about how there's different states in our nervous system, and that the vagus nerve influences the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that calms or slows us down, but that there's two different branches in the vagus nervous system, and the vagus nerve. One that takes us into a place of feeling that all is well. It's the newer branch of the vagus nerve. And there's another branch of the vagus nerve, which is designed to really help us deal with danger, with when things feel scary. And we'll look at that one a little bit, and then we'll talk about what's happening with Surefoot. But basically, in the all is well state, we have the capacity to experience both excitement and arousal in the sympathetic nervous system, and a calming down from that again, sort of like in the waves that you see here, sort of excitement in learning or doing fun things or play fighting or doing whatever, and then calming down so that you can sleep, you can rest, you can stand still and be still without triggering the defense systems. So it feels safe. And the key thing is that we all have a particular range that we feel safe within, and it differs from animal to animal, person to person, and situation to situation. But if you're in that range that feels safe, then the gates for learning and for performing well and for being really present are open. But if you go outside of that, like if something frightens you or if it's overwhelming, then you might spike into like more arousal for action in a response in our body that's designed for danger. So that's the fight flight response, when you get into a sympathetic nervous system spike of action, fight flight. And if fight flight doesn't work, or if it's not suitable for your situation, if you've learned not to do that, you might go into what's called freeze, which is the other branch of the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic nervous system, that goes into a shutdown mode that's designed as a response, as a coping mechanism for too much danger, too much overwhelm, too much other stuff. And it's basically kind of a shutdown. It can go all the way into a faint. It can be as simple as just sort of zoning out a little bit, or just sort of, you know, the lights are on but nobody's home kind of situation, right? You can have that full spectrum of response that can be a freeze. And these are protective responses. And the key thing is, in the protective responses, here's sort of a list of what they look like. Both the protective responses, the fight, flight, and the freeze, have a really high cost of doing business. And in those states, if a horse is in those states, or we're in that state, we don't perform well. We don't perform as well as we could, because a bunch of our energy is taken over into taking survival stuff, taking care of ourselves. And we also don't learn well, we don't engage as well socially, and we don't recover from activity as well. So it's a much different kind of response than being in the place that feels safe, where rest and recovery can happen, where social engagement happens well, communication, where learning can happen easily. So really, you know, the key things for learning, the things that really need to be in place in order to learn something new, is that you need to experience something, because your body believes what it experiences more than what you think. So especially in animals who are much more embedded in their biology than humans, who think they can think their way out of things, our biology really needs to experience something before it believes it. So you need to experience something that's interesting and that's engaging and that feels safe. Then the doors for learning open up. Then something new can settle in and our body can kind of go, that's interesting. I might do more of that, right? Or I could use this because it feels good and I might want to do this. And so that's the key thing I think that's really interesting about Surefoot, is that Surefoot pads and the Surefoot process that you've created really allow the experience of feeling safe and being interested to show up. Because some key features of feeling safe and being interested, you know, like what makes something feel safe, and that we talked about that a lot more last time, is that you can take little steps at a time, in, out, this much, then back off, those kinds of things. There's choice. So for the Surefoot, your horse has choice. That's a key feature of how you teach it, Wendy. And that there's long pauses so that your body can kind of take it in and kind of think about it for a while and go, right? And then something can start to shift. And so Surefoot does all of that. So it's very cool. And it's basically, I think I'd love to open up. We wanted to talk about, you know, examples of how this happens and how you've seen it happening. You know, I've seen examples when we did the case studies with Bob, the off-the-track racehorse, right? Or Shiner, the Mustang. You know, those kinds of situations where you see a horse really shifting and something shifts in how they can be present with what's going on. And then something can shift in their body and how they do stuff. So I want to turn it over to you, Wendy, because you can hear what's going on. For anybody that's just joined, I am somehow muted on this. I'm going to see if I can find out what's going on here.
So hopefully everybody can hear me. And I've unmuted Robin because she was there with Bob and Shiner. And some of the things that seem really important these days is that there's this development of trust between the person offering the pads and the horse receiving the pads that's really important in this whole process and in helping horses get out of anxiety and into calmness. And I'm just going to type, let me know if you can hear me, because Violet still can't. Okay, so that process of the horse. You hear me?
I somehow had my volume turned down too low to hear you. I hear you now.
Hey, I could stop typing at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Yes. How simple is that, right?
So just go back to your other slide there, Violet.
Which one?
That one. So I was just with Ida Hammer and a whole group of her barefoot trimmers, her advanced people, and you know, I showed them this picture because this was a horse that we couldn't do anything about his feet. He was a horse that was in Costa Rica. He wasn't owned by the outfitter. We needed extra horses, and this was one of the horses that she could get who was really safe and that we could use in the retreat. And the farrier came. He was supposed to shoe the horse, right? And instead of that, he just tightened the clinches and left. And this horse was very grumpy, and if you asked him to back up, he'd want to bite you, and he was really unhappy until I did the Surefoot pads. And I worked with him in this round pen and just started with one pad, and he could walk away whenever he liked. And we got this picture. But the thing that was really significant is that after that, we couldn't do anything about his feet. You know, the woman didn't own him. The farrier had left. It's really hard to find somebody down there that can do work. And, you know, the situation was what it was. But the thing that was the most interesting was that afterward, this horse would let me ask him to back up and I could be around him and all the grumpiness stopped. So just from this one session, he felt safer. And so even though we couldn't really resolve the thing that we really wanted to help him with, which was his feet, everything else about this horse's attitude shifted so that he was still that super safe horse that we had for the people that we needed him for. And he felt better.
Well, it's interesting that in this case, he stayed safe too, because sometimes when you give the horse the chance to express something, they may start to express things, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they really know their jobs and they stay within what they need to do. And it's amazing when a horse gets to have some choice and gets to be engaged with humans in a way that they think is interesting.
Yeah. And so I found that fascinating, that how much his attitude shifted just from, it was really just one session. And because we were there for two different retreats. And so we did this at the end of the first retreat because, you know, there's a lot going on when you're doing these retreats. And but at the end of the first one, we did this, and because we were down where this facility is and where we had the round pen. And it was so fascinating to see how different this horse was after that. It was really quite a surprise.
Yeah, and it's, like we just don't know what's going to have what effect, right? And it's like a little bit of human kindness and a little bit of sort of consideration on our part and a little bit of offering something of what would you think is interesting? What would you like to a horse? Seems to be something that so many horses are so interested in experiencing, right? Then they kind of go, hey, that was kind of interesting. You're not so bad. I think I like being around you, and being at the gate, or being sort of more interested to be out there with people.
So what do you think from the perspective of vagus nerve, what do you think's happening that you can see this kind of a huge shift actually? How would you explain that from
Well,
the perspective?
to me, a lot of it has to do with the experience shifts from being something they have to tolerate and just get through to being something that becomes interesting and feels safe.
Even though we can't really, I mean, I can't say whether the horse was in pain or not in pain. I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously his feet are really bad. And I don't know if it's, like some people, you just get used to it. And so that's the norm. And so you don't know any difference. So you just keep going. But we didn't change his feet, and yet so if there was pain, which, that's such a difficult thing to judge, even with people,
Yeah.
because everyone experiences pain so differently. Like when I was in the hospital the last time for my surgery a year and a half ago, the only way I could tell that I was in pain was I'd start getting foggy. And then they would come in and go, oh, you need something for pain? And they'd give me some, and then I'd clear up again. But I didn't feel pain like, ow, whereas other people feel pain it really, really differently.
Well, and we block it out. Like one of the things about the freeze state is that you can numb experience, right? And I think a freeze state is a coping mechanism for a lot of situations where otherwise it would be too much. Otherwise it would be too difficult. Otherwise it would be just unbearable for some, or you'd rather not experience that. So we numb ourselves to the experience, and I think horses do that. I think trail riding horses learn to do that. They get all sorts of people that ride differently and do this and do this and do this and all this kind of stuff, and they just figure out, I just have to get through the day and do my job. So
and that's very much this horse. Yep, because he's a horse that that the guy uses for beach rides for all these different people, and so he's always got somebody different, and he just goes about his day.
Yeah, I just think of how amazing is it that this horse agrees to do that?
Yeah,
and sort of graciously keeps people safe, right?
Yeah.
And so now he's getting something back, or he's kind of going, hey, this is kind of interesting to pay attention to. I'll pay some attention.
So like with this whole vagus nerve thing, like say you have a really bad trauma, and what is the process? Because like I come across a lot of horses that I think have had a traumatic experience, and very different in response, say, to this horse, where they've really lost trust. And what are the best ways to try and get horses back with us in terms of trusting when they've really had a really traumatic experience?
I think it's similar to humans. Like we have to be trustworthy. We have to come in. We have to be clear and present, and be there with a good intention to be with this horse and offer them something good. Right? I think that's a big part of it. They sense that. Our biologies sense this even faster than our brains pick this up. So in our nervous system level, we have a big nerve complex, and I'm sure horses do, sort of in the chest area, which is more where the newer branch of the vagus nerve, the ventral vagus nerve, is here, and with the eye contact and with the engagement and social engagement. And we also have
Can I stop you for a second? Maybe just unshare your screen so they can see what you're.
Oh yeah, okay.
There you go. Awesome. Because you're talking with your hands, I see that in the corner there.
But it's, like through the vagus nerve, mammals have the new branch of the vagus nerve. Horses are mammals. We need social contact, we need social engagement, and we're pinging off of the others around us. So horses will pick up where we're at. We will pick up where horses are at. They will notice if we're with them or not. So if I can breathe out and become really present and be there with the horse, and try to be present in a clear way, not a creepy way, not trying to be too small or not in their way, just say, I'm here, I'd like to say hello. You know, I'd like to say hi to you in a way that feels okay. So sometimes I will even just vocalize what I want because our intention communicates somehow. I don't know
Right.
exactly how, but you start with that. It's like, I am here because I want to help you feel good, feel better, feel like something is, it's okay to be around a human being, around me, right? And I'm going to do what I can to try and make this experience something that works for you and works for me. And already that starts to set up something that's different from, I'm going to come in here and show you who's boss or something like that, right? It's different.
So this social piece is fascinating because
It
it's
is.
really, I mean, you have the part that's, oh, just the way the nervous system reacts, but really what, as I understand it, what you're saying is it's the interaction that really matters in Vegas.
Well, what happens, the reason the new branch of the vagus nerve developed in mammals is because mammals are born and then are dependent on others for the first months, years of their life, like humans for a long time, right? Horses, for the first while, we drink milk from our mothers. We depend on others to keep us alive and teach us how to be in the world. And learning how to, so this new part of the vagus nerve is all about how can I interact with you so that I feel safe and I know that you're safe and I know how to be in the world in a way that feels safe, rather than just using my old gut response, which is, you know, like either shut everything down or go wild, do one or the other, right? Like the old response is much sort of blunter instrument in a sense. And it's sort of like if things go wrong, you go into the old gut response of freeze or fight flight. You either get really big in your actions and deal with fight flight, or you go deep into freeze and your whole body starts to shut down. But it's kind of a blunt instrument and you don't necessarily come out quickly enough to stay alive. This is why about 25% of birds that go into shock don't recover.
Oh, wow. Because they don't
Right?
have the two parts of Vegas.
No, they don't have the two parts of vagus. And the newer part of vagus is way more nuanced. It sort of figures out, hey, I only need this much of that response, and I'll just stop for a second, see if it's really a big problem or not. Oh, it's not that big a problem. I can go back to being okay, right? An
Okay.
example I like to use is my horse, you know, she sees little robins and she spooks because they're startling, right? Even though she's lived outside her all her life. But she sort of spooks and she stops for a minute and she kind of looks around and we go, it's a little fluffy bird. And then she goes, aha. And then she goes off and does her thing, right? So then she's back. She's sort of thought it through. She's responded appropriately in a more nuanced way. And now she can get back into what feels okay and continue on. So that's different. And the whole social engagement part is a part that we can learn, that we need to learn from those around us. That's why horses that are not socialized in a herd, once they're put in a herd, have a hard time. They don't know what to do.
Right.
The horses that grew up in a herd have figured out all the manners, and there's a whole dynamic that goes on, and everybody understands all the rules of the game, and they get along, right?
Right.
The horses like off the track thoroughbreds that get put into a herd, and they're busy trying to do stuff, and all the rest of the horses are like, what's with you? You know, seriously, where did you grow up? And so I think that social engagement part is also going on between us and our horse. And so we have to be in our inner sense, in our intention and in our presence. We have to make ourselves as trustworthy as possible with this horse as a first step. And then we have to say, hello, I'm interested in your experience. Because it's not my expectation of you. It's like, I'm interested in your experience. I'm going to do my best to be a smart human being and figure out what's going on for you so I can help you be more comfortable. And that's Surefoot does that so well because you're looking at, what do you want?
Yeah.
You want this pad or do you want that pad? Do you want under this foot or not? Or you're pushing it to the back foot. Great, let's put it under the back foot. How's that? Oh, 10 seconds is good. Great, you're off. Right?
Right.
Whatever. Like you're really looking for that. And that kind of responsiveness is huge in terms of how safe someone feels to be around.
Right. And that's because that's the thing that I've seen the whole time is that the horses so quickly figure out that I'm a safe individual and that they want to be with me, to the unhappiness of the rider often because they won't leave and they're trying to get their horse to go away. But the good news is that anybody can do this with their horse. So anybody can create that relationship with their horse where their horse feels safe, because anybody can use Surefoot pads with their horse.
Yeah. And I think a big part of it is, and it's the same with like the Tellington Touch and with other things, where you're noticing the experience of the horse, right, and saying, I'm noticing what you're doing. And that's really interesting that you're telling me that. You know, I'm interested in your response and in and adjusting what I'm doing so that it feels okay for you. And the horse will recognize that and go, really? Wow.
Yep.
And that shift, it's like the temperature or the climate in the room changes.
Yep.
And they kind of go, oh, well, in that case,
Yep.
let's do this together, right? A lot of horses will do that.
Yeah, the majority of horses. And then you have the outliers that I always talk about.
Yeah.
And the outliers are like the horse that I had in Canada that was born being super cautious about anything it put its feet on. And in 3 days, I never got it on a pad, but it wasn't about the pad. It was, I'm never going to put you in a position where you have to freak out. I'm always going to position myself between you and the pad and keep you safe. I'm going to move the pad away and protect you while we check this pad out. And so pretty soon he was really happy to follow me around and be curious, maybe touch it. And then the owner actually has had him on a pad because she saw how I did it. And then she just followed on with, the pad's just an excuse to learn something in that case, which is this horse's nervous system is way more sensitive and his feet are way more sensitive. And so if we can help him learn to trust, and then hopefully to trust standing on different surfaces, he doesn't have to freak out and drop her if he steps on something and just freaks so fast that, he doesn't drop her on purpose. He's just super quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole thing of learning how to feel safe.
Yeah.
I think that's a key part. That whole, the feeling safe piece is where your nervous system then lands in the place where you can access the more nuanced branch of the vagus nerve, where you can get into the thinking process, where you can catch yourself when something surprises you or scares you and assess, rather than react first and assess later.
So the horses and I've come across them that the term would be trained in fear.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of these where, I've had them on pads and they seemed okay. And then 6 months later, I come back to put them on pads and they bronk off.
Yeah.
So either they were never okay in the first place, or do horses decompensate like they've been like in that freeze state and now they're starting to come out of the freeze state and suddenly they have they don't know how to react. So then they go freeze, explode.
Yeah, and it might be that they need to take action. Like if they're in the biology, if you have gone through a traumatic situation where you wanted to do something to deal with it better and you couldn't take action, it might be that when you start to come out of it, we have 9 minutes remaining. We're good.
Yes, we're good.
Great. It's because I was messing around at the beginning. But in trauma, when you have wanted to take action and you couldn't, and you've gone into a freeze, right? Because basically it's all that was left for you. You couldn't get out. The horse was being pushed into the trailer or had to be compliant. Right. And so they learned to be compliant. One of the things that will happen is when the freeze starts to thaw, that they will want to do the action they couldn't do to take care of themselves, right? So in the biology, there's a need in the body to do the action, to run, to kick, to bite, to do something that was going to be what they wanted to do to take care of the situation, and they couldn't. Right?
Got it.
So it's quite possible that a horse will go through an expressive period when they first start to express. So it's not always.
Those are tricky horses because if you open that can, you don't know what's going to come out.
Yes, and that's one of the risks. Like sometimes people prefer to have a compliant horse because they're manageable. Right. Yeah, that's why we train them to become, there's a lot of desensitizing processes where we're trying to numb them down so they don't respond to things, right? Which is different from teaching them to notice something, think about it, and decide how to deal with it. That's a very different kind of training process.
Right.
Like the process of inviting the horse to think is different from asking the horse to just not respond, just to go numb.
Yeah, I talk about skills versus drills. Skills are learning things, and drills are you just do it over and over and over and over, and there's no option there.
And you don't know necessarily what's going to happen for your horse. You may end up with a more expressive horse.
Right.
Or you may have a horse like the one that we saw in the example there, who knows that his job is to be fairly numb. But if you're going to let him express sometimes, he's going to enjoy it, right? He's going to enjoy the opportunity to, and we kind of saw that when we worked with, on the Icelandic horse farm with the Mustang, with Shiner.
Yeah.
I mean, this lovely, lovely giant Mustang who's learned to he hangs out with the Icelandic horses. He's become a horse that they use in the clinics that they have there. He's very agreeable about doing it. Every once in a while, he sees something that surprises him, and then it's like a big surprise. And then he goes, "Oh yeah, go back to this." But what we saw with the Surefoot and with some other things that we did is that he started to become interested. all
Yes.
of a sudden the lights went on in his eyes differently. So instead of kind of doing his thing and knowing that he wanted to do his job and be good at doing his job, all of a sudden he started to be kind of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
You know?
He was so much fun at the end. He was so
Yeah.
curious. So what I did, just so people know, is I wound up setting the pads out in a circle, and I'd stand in the middle like musical chairs, and he would have to trot around because he would tend to hippie hop into a canter because he'd get his foot heavy stuck on the ground, and so he had to trot, and he was trotting, and then I'd start walking to a pad, and he would see which pad I was going toward, and he'd trot there really quick and get there and wait for me to put his foot on it. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and it's like suddenly he was really interested in it. He realized he could be interested right now because he was allowed to sort of say what he wanted. And for him, this was pretty exciting. And it was really different from, you know, when I've ridden him I've had him in lessons, and he's very well behaved horse, and he does his thing, right? But this was different. It's like, ooh, this is fun.
Yeah, I just realized I haven't gone back and pulled up those videos and done anything with them, so I'm making myself a note.
Right.
It's been really crazy. I leave for San Diego tomorrow, and then from there I go to Australia on the 13th and meet up with
Wow.
in New Zealand
Yeah.
for 2 days. So life's a little hectic. This is like a winter project, but I put a note on my desk for when I get home.
Well, and you know, just continuing on with the horses from when we were together there doing that, there was Bob, the off the track thoroughbred, right? What a great name for an off the track racehorse.
Yeah.
Successful racehorse, 7 years of being on the track, all those kinds of things. Now he was with this lovely woman who wants him to have a good life, right? And when he came in, he's like high-headed and he's doing his thing, right? And afterwards, there's the before and after pictures. You have them on your Facebook and the photos
Yeah.
in the Facebook. Afterwards, he's standing there and he's like this. And he's kind of walking around like this, and he'd walk around with his head really low. And the next day, she says she went out to get him to bring him back to go to the clinic, and he's at the gate waiting, right? It's like, can we do more of that? Or whatever. And it's like he also was having this experience of something different, that he got to feel different, he got to experience himself differently. And it's like, just they will go into this experimenting of, oh, I can have my head right down to the ground, I can do things really differently from how I did before, and I can just see what it feels like, and I'm allowed to have the space to do that.
Yeah, and he was a very smart guy because he quickly figured out that this was a good deal and that he was going to really enjoy the process.
Yeah.
But the amount of change, and the owner contacted Robin like a couple weeks later and said he was still making improvements, you know,
Yeah.
getting better and better. So that was really, really fun. So I think that's one of the take homes, is that when you bring a horse out of freeze, some of them come out and they're fine, and others come out and have to go through that process of movement, whatever movement they couldn't do at the time where the trauma happened. And I can relate to this because when I had my accident where the horse flipped on me, I couldn't move. And years later, I didn't understand it, but you know, like Sally Swift would put her hand on my legs and it would start jumping around like a fish on the end of a line. And it's only now that I understand that was my leg running, which couldn't run because I couldn't even move. And so the body has to move to let go of that stuff that happened at that moment. And we don't always know what it is that the horse's movement is going to be, whether it explode, whether it's, you know, just a sigh, or whether it's, you know, something in between.
Yeah, and I think a certain amount of graciousness on our part to allow them to go, okay, I see you doing this, and you're really concerned about something. Keep me safe, right? You can express what you need to do, but your boundary is that you have to also keep me safe, right? And so having that clear intention with that, I think, helps as well. The real clear intentions, whatever it is.
Right.
You stay safe, I stay safe, I'll do my best to take care of you, you do your best to take care of me, and we'll work together, right?
And that's always why it's a good thing to start surefoot on the ground, unmounted, in an open environment, so that if the horse does need to express himself or move off the pads or whatever, he has the room to do that, and you give him permission to that. Because if you're in a crowded room, or if, you know, like a aisleway or something like that, or there's a lot of people in the arena, he's not going to feel safe enough to be able to offer to move what he needs to do.
Yeah, that really limits his choice.
Right.
So if you're wanting to give him choice and ask him to help keep you safe and you keep him safe, then it's nice to have more space with that. And I think that's a really key part. Like sometimes you get the shaking stuff, but it seems that the shaking stuff is often a residual action that your body wants to take to finish taking care of yourself. So then you can kind of be present more clearly right now with this stuff, right? So from the freeze and from the biological responses to danger point of view to come into the safe place, there might be that kind of transition stage. Yeah, that's sort of unexpected or unusual.
Right. And you know, it's amazing how many horses I've worked with, how few actually have to do something dramatic. Most
Yeah.
of them are just like instantly like, this is cool, this is a good deal. I'm just like happy, and it's awesome. It's really a very small number of outliers, and there's different types of outliers. We had the one that fell over when Linda Tillington Jones was there when I first started, and he flat on I thought I killed him. And you know, we've had the horse that took off like a racehorse who had never run it flat out. He'd only crow hopped and bucked all of his life, and the woman thought she was going to have to retire him because he was crippled, and now he was doing extended trots. So
Yeah.
you know, so there's all these very few outliers, the ones that explode and things, that very small numbers, but they do exist. So I always tell people the first time you put a horse on pads, that's the time you have to be the most attentive and most careful, because you don't know what you have.
And really watch the signs, right? Like we talk about listening to whispers. It's like really listening, watching the signs so that you're not surprised if the horse does something.
Okay, we have less than a minute.
So it's like watching for the signs, watching the eyes, watching the ears. If it looks like they've got something coming, step back, give them space.
Yep. So this has been awesome. I'm so glad to have more time with you. And it's Voilet Van Hees. How can they find you?
Oh, violetvanhees.com.
Okay, great. I'll post that when I put up the video. Thanks
Great.
so much, Voilet. It's great to have you back.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.